Yes, I was eventually going to discuss Sony's newest film, Madam Web. What was really cool is this opens with the newest Columbia Pictures logo, the 100th anniversary logo. I had not seen that on the big screen yet. And after that logo shows up, the rest of the movie quickly, very quickly, goes downhill. The original idea of this movie was intriguing. It seemed like I was going to be doing something like Terminator. That's what I had heard initially, and I didn't know if that meant it was going to be time travel or what. It's not time travel, it's the fact that these characters can see into the future. We have a villain who can look into the future, we have the main lead who can also look into the future. He sees in the future that these three spider women are going to kill him. In order to make sure that doesn't happen, he wants to kill the girls before they become spider women. And, something like Terminator. I thought that was an interesting idea. It's a cool idea, not an original idea, but it's cool. And it doesn't really know what to do after that. And it fills the runtime with very needless exposition, trying to set up this mystery that's really not there. I mean, we already have the who, the what, we are missing a little bit of the why, but the why isn't all that compelling once you find out. By the time you find out that there is a reason that Dakota Johnson's mother was in the Amazon, it's not all that interesting because we don't know much about Dakota Johnson's character. She's not all that interesting. But yet the movie somehow finds a way to make this stretch on for nearly 2 hours, trying to develop this mystery behind this villain who isn't interesting. We don't know anything about either. 30 years after Dakota Johnson's mother dies, suddenly this villain has like all this money and this wealth, and he also has superpowers, but we never saw any of that. It's like, well, wait, did he kill the mother and take the spider? Because they were in the Amazon studying spiders before she died, which, by the way, that line is not even in the movie itself. It was in the trailer. It is not in the movie. But we never find out if he, sold the DNA of the spider and was able to create some kind of biological weapon or some kind of biological cure. We don't know. It can be inferred that he got superpowers from this spider. That's why he has the power to grab people and spread a venomous poison into someone's body. But beyond that, I don't know, where did he get all this money from? Beyond just wanting to stay alive, what is this villain's drive? What is keeping him going? What is his ultimate goals? We have no idea. I think of the movie Terminator and the fact that that movie works so well with that great idea, sending a villain back in time to kill the hero before he becomes a hero, or even before he's born. The movie works so well because the villain has a very compelling reason for going back. You can get behind that story very fast, and that villain has a lot of intrigue, has interesting characteristics, and has an interesting performance. And then we have the hero of that story, and in both movies, Terminator and Terminator 2, we have a lead character who is incredibly interesting, and we can figure out how they're going to go from this point in their life to the next point, how this is going to completely change their life around. With this movie, you never get any sense of what the villain's drive is, and for these heroes, we never really get behind their story. We don't know how this is going to ultimately impact them. One of the weird things is that, okay, so we got Dakota Johnson, not all that memorable, doesn't have much of a personality throughout. They don't really develop her character except for the fact that her mom died. That is essentially all her story is, and the rest of it is just meant to be inferred. They don't really write much into that, but she gets superpowers kind of randomly. It's weird because technically she should have had them for the past 30 years, but they only start showing up now, and that's never explained. And also the powers are a little confusing. I could kind of get behind it at times, but other times it seemed like the way the powers were used earlier doesn't really match up with how they're being used now. And I guess the point of the character is to really be the shepherd of the other Spider Women who have not become Spider Women yet. And I guess I suspected that they would get their superpowers in the movie. It is an origin story. They showed the costumes in the trailer, but I always expected that those costumes will probably only be used in the third act because they're probably going to do that thing where they get their powers, they're just learning to use them, and then by the end they're going to meet some, I don't know, old lady in New York who does sewing, and she's like, oh, I made you costumes, and then they'll wear them for the final act or something. But none of that happens, and that I guess I was wrong. They only wear the costumes in the Vision scenes. And I feel like that's just false advertising in general because they made it seem like the costumes would be a bigger part of the movie than they actually are. They're only in 2 scenes, just a few seconds, and it's only for what will be happening in the future, I guess, as far as this movie's timeline goes. But for the characters themselves, they don't even get their superpowers. We don't learn much about these characters. Even the generic tropes are lazy because we got one character who's wearing a shirt that says, "I eat math for breakfast." But there's only one time where she actually uses some sort of complex math, and then the rest of the time, she doesn't do anything. They were fitting that in there for her to have a defining trait, but it doesn't really carry through the rest of the movie. It's just pretty random otherwise. You got another character who is meant to be the more badass of the group, and then you got Sydney Sweeney, which is meant to be the shy one of the group, but I don't think any of it really works because we don't know much about their background. There's like one scene where they talk about who their parents are and how they're mostly forgotten by all their families, and that's kind of how they find each other with Dakota Johnson. Like I said, Dakota Johnson's meant to be the character who is shepherding all of them, and then they'll eventually become some sort of Spider-Woman team. This team doesn't have a lot of charisma. They don't have a lot of character, and as far as learning their abilities, what makes them special? I mean, what about these characters is going to get me excited to see them become Spider-Women? Because for some reason, this movie doesn't want them to become superheroes yet. I just don't feel anything for them yet. They only do like one training exercise, and it's to do CPR, and I almost started laughing because it reminded me of that scene in The Office. And the dialogue is already so bad. The dialogue is so stale and lacks all personality, and then they try to do this thing where it's almost like they're ad-libbing and adding some banter into the scenes to really pad out that runtime, but the banter is so awkward, and it's like either they read the script just that morning and, are just trying to learn their lines, or it almost feels like they're making up lines on the spot, and it feels so unnatural. But beyond everyone's line delivery, you have the villain's line delivery, which is by far the worst. First of all, most of it was done with ADR. There's a lot of ADR in this movie, but his is the worst. It seems like everything that the villain says had to be redone, and it's this brooding voice, and every single line ends up sounding incredibly funny. I mean, the main character's last name is Webb, and at one point they find out what what Dakota Johnson's last name is. It's Webb, and the villain's like, "Did you say Webb?" And it's like everyone's laughing in the theater because what a silly sounding line, but when it's coming from this guy who's already a pretty bad actor in this movie, then you got that voice coming out of him that just sounds so ridiculous, and he's constantly going on these monologues about his life, like, "Oh, I came from nothing. I pay you a lot of money. This isn't just a coincidence. Maybe this is meant to happen." I don't know. It's just so boring. It's honestly one of the worst villains I've seen from any Marvel movie, to be honest. Honestly, it just feels like they're trying to break up the team as many times as they can, because Dakota Johnson will just leave the characters to go to her apartment, for instance, to find out information that, honestly, it's not like she really finds out much. It's just a long extended sequence where she goes to the apartment to look through a briefcase of her mother's, and then she sees the photo and realizes, oh, the guy in this photo is the guy that was chasing us on the subway. But it's like, we really did all of that just to get to that conclusion. And again, it's treating everything like it's a mystery when it's not interesting, and it's not really a mystery. And she's also leaving them at the worst times. They're being chased by somebody who's out to kill them all. And on top of that, the teenage girls aren't very smart either, because, hey, we were just chased by a villain. What should we do now? I mean, should we just hide in the woods and try to stay safe, or should we go to this local diner and make a big fool of ourselves and get a lot of attention to ourselves for some reason, and then, oh no, the villain found us? It's like, it's so obvious. I also have the usual complaints, like, yeah, they got bad CG in this. I mean, there's a scene where, Madam Web's, in this different realm, and it all just looks terribly fake, terribly done, and there's a scene where there's, a spider person running through the forest, and he looks terrible. Oh, I forgot, too, she travels to Peru at one point. Not only does she travel to her apartment and leave the girls, Dakota Johnson also travels to Peru somehow. And this is during the time where, the police are looking for her, and somehow she hitched a ride on a plane to Peru. And she doesn't really accomplish much in Peru either. She discovers, one thing, and it's, 30 years later, and I'm like, you don't think the guy in the Amazon who said, "Oh, I'll wait here for 30 years for you to come back. Like, you don't think you could have just called her on the phone and tell her the same exact information that she traveled all this way to find out? It just feels so pointless. If I can give the movie some credit, I do think the outfits look kind of cool, um, for how limited they're used. And I like the use of Britney Spears' Toxic. I did. I liked it. But otherwise, what started out as a pretty cool idea that pays tribute to a classic 80s movie ended up becoming something where they just didn't know what to do beyond that little nugget of an idea. Like, they just didn't know what else to do with this story. And in the end, it just created a bunch of bland characters, shoehorning itself into a Spider-Man universe that, again, I don't even know if this movie could figure out which Spider-Man universe it was supposed to be. I mean, Aunt May's not in the movie, but we have Uncle Ben. It's Adam Scott. And I was thinking the reason Aunt May's probably not here is because this was probably meant to be the Tom Holland Spider-Man universe, and they probably needed to get Marissa Tomei, and they either couldn't get her or to DH her. I mean, she looks pretty good for her age anyway, so I mean, it wouldn't have taken much to DH her. And on top of that, they probably didn't know if they could put it in that universe because that is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they don't. This isn't technically a Marvel Cinematic Universe film, despite what the actors apparently thought. I guess I'm just shocked that after Morbius, they decided to use those writers again, because what are they? Are they the writers who are holding the keys to making the Sinister Six work? Maybe this movie was already too far along by the time Morbius came out and the reactions to it came out. Who knows? But this movie is a mess, and honestly, I almost like Morbius just a little bit more, because Matt Smith was having a great time in Morbius. I don't think anybody's really having that great of a time in this movie. This movie is a throwback to late 90s and early 2000s superhero movies in the same way that Venom and Morbius were, except this one goes as far as doing the same level of quality as a lot of the bad movies from that era. But worse than that, it just feels like an unaired or never picked up WB TV pilot that was like meant to start a show where, like, within 2 or 3 seasons you would see the other characters get their superpowers and eventually, become the superheroes, like maybe by season 3 or something. I give this movie 1 out of 5 stars. I really didn't like it. I had a lot of fun watching it. It was laughably bad, so it's been a while since I've seen a movie like this, and I guess I'm just shocked that at this point there's still Marvel movies like this coming out. I thought we were done with these. I thought we were at least going to get decent, subpar, or great Marvel movies from now on, but it's weird that these really bad ones are still sneaking through somehow, and it really takes me back to a different time.